Hello, Petal. How you doing? How's it all going? I thought I'd sneak in an extra recording, since I had some time and some energy and some inclination. Well, I've always got inclination. That's absolutely 100% all the time. It's just the energy that's usually the lacking part. Or something or another along those lines. Anyway, please let me know how you're doing in the comments as always. I love hearing from you, and it's just nice. I love our little community, and I know I say it a lot, but it's because you deserve it, because each and every one of you is very much appreciated. And no matter what challenges are ahead in the world, we can endure. We've got this thing. So, my lovely beans, shall we get on with chapter 18 of Paint Your Dragon by the wonderful Mr. Tom Holt? The big fight. Seen purely from the viewpoint of logistics and administration, it was the greatest show in history. Everybody who was, had been, or would be anybody was there, and the complexities of setting up a switchboard for the retrospective booking office had taxed Mr. Courtright's ingenuity to its fullest extent. Or take the popcorn concession, a chronological disaster poised to happen. Any popcorn eaten by visitors from the past or the future would leave a serious imbalance in the fabric of reality, particularly after it had passed through the visitor's digestive system and entered the ecology of his native century. In order to compensate, Courtright had to estimate the amount of popcorn likely to be eaten and arrange for compensatory amounts of matter to be removed from or added to a whole series of past and future destinations. As for the envelope of artificial time in which the auditorium was contained, it had cleaned out chubby stocks down to the very last second. God only knew what would happen if the fight lasted beyond the 12th round. All these problems, of course, were more than adequately accounted for in the price of the tickets, and that caused yet another organisational nightmare, given that, for example, in order to pay for his ticket, the Emperor Nero had leached out the entire economy of the Roman Empire, which could only mean total fiscal meltdown, violence in the streets, and the fall of the empire several centuries ahead of schedule. Narrator's note, do you say schedule or schedule? I like schedule. It's rather direct and rare, whereas schedule is kind of like a day-to-day use, you know. So it's a word for all seasons and occasions. I digress. Fortunately, a client of Lynn Courtright's, who controlled various financial syndicates in the 1st century AD, was able to offer bridging finance. Disaster was averted. 10% was earned for the Courtright agency, and Nero, who paid the first instalment of the loan by insuring Rome and then burning it down, was sitting in the front row, munching olives and trying unsuccessfully to persuade Genghis Khan to take St. George to win at 15-1. There was also a band, and cheerleaders, and huge spotlights producing as much light and heat as a small star, and commentators from every TV station in eternity, all getting ready to provide simultaneous coverage. Live was, in context, a word best avoided, and cameras and film crews and sound crews and men in leather jackets with headphones on, wandering around, prodding bits of trading flex and engineers swearing at each other, and all the spectacle and pageantry of a galaxy-class sporting event. The panel of judges, who were 2 saints, 2 devils, and, representing the saurian community, 2 enormous iguanas, were sworn in. There was an awed hush as the doors at the back swung open to admit the referee, no less a dignitary than a Quetzalcoatl. Now, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, please excuse me, but that's how I've always pronounced it ever since I first saw the word in Final Fantasy VIII. Seriously, awesome video game. I digress. No less a dignitary than a Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpent of the Aztecs. Had his worshippers in pre-conquest Mexico known that when he promised to come again to judge the quick and the dead, he meant this. Narrator's note, you know, it's 50 years since Iron Maiden's been together. Quick and the dead. If you know, you know. I'll get back to the story. Sorry, apologies. He meant this. Maybe they'd have been a little bit less forthcoming with the gold and blood sacrifices. It was nearly time. The food vendors left the auditorium, trays empty. The roar of voices dwindled down to an expectant buzz. All it needed now was for the contestants to show up, and the contest for the ethical championship of the universe could begin. And Cartwright turned to Stevenson and said, "Well, where the fuck are they?" And Stevenson leant across to Cartwright and said, "I thought they were with you." "Finished," Bianca gasped. "Forget the aesthetics for a moment. In terms of sheer stamina, it was the greatest achievement in the history of art." With an effort, she unclenched her cramped fingers sufficiently to allow chisel and mallet to fall to the ground and collapsed backward into her chair, only to find there was somebody already sitting in it. "Sakopona, enko asana." Bianca did a quick Zebedee impression, looked down and saw a little wizened man curled up in her chair. He was wearing a leopard skin with lots of unusual accessories and holding a fly whisk. "Hi," she replied. "You must be Kanzana. I didn't hear you come in." "No," the witch doctor replied. "You didn't." He nodded towards the statues. "Impressive," he said. "All my own work," Bianca replied, flustered. "You know what you've got to do." "Is the Pope a Catholic?" "Right, well, I'd better leave you to it then. Do you need anything? Hot water? Towels? That sort of thing?" Kazana shook his head. "A fire and a pinch of dust, my sister," he replied. Before Bianca could offer further assistance, he produced a big brass zipper from the catskin bag hung around his neck. "Dust?" Kazana grinned and drew a fingertip across the surface of the table beside his chair. "I know," he said. "I remind you of your mother." "In certain respects," Bianca replied. She could never have worn leopard, though, not with her colouring. The witch doctor shrugged. Then, with a tiny movement of his thumb, he lit the lighter, sprinkled the dust, and mumbled something that Bianca didn't quite catch. And action. Cut 2. Kurt's Nissen hut. You could call it the Galleria Lundqvist, but not if you want to see tomorrow while he's listening, where the 15 statues with strong West Midland accents are telling him exactly why they refuse to have anything at all to do with his plan. The sound effects are rushing wind, a shimmering tinkly sound, shorthand for magic, deep and rumbling unworldly laughter, followed by silence. The other noises off were just meretricious effects, the parsley garnish on a slice of underdone magic, but the silence, the absence of querulous whining, now that is something else. Uncanny is an understatement in the same league as describing the Black Death as a nasty bug that's going round. Kurt reacts. He says, "Yippee!" And so would you if you just spent several weeks cooped up with Mrs. Blanchflower, Mr. Potts, and 13 others, extremely similar. In their place, 15 of the world's finest, most exquisite statues, solid masonry from head to toe, without enough sentience between a lot of them to animate a DSS counterclerk. Kurt looked round, gazing ecstatically at each one in turn. Compared to him, stout Cortez would have made one hell of a poker player. No more whinging. No more threats to report him to the English Tourist Board. No more caustic remarks about the lack of brown sauce to go with the escallops of veal. Narrator's note, if you haven't had HB sauce ever in your life, seriously, you are not living. HB sauce on a bit of toast, oh my goodness gracious, delicious. Or actually, it's really nice on jacket potato. Or HB sauce on mashed potatoes. Do you know they do a curry flavour? And they do a chilli flavour. And they do a fruity flavour. I like HB sauce. I'm not promoting. I'm not paid by them in any way, shape or form. I just like HB sauce. I digress. But veal? Nah. Slowly, almost like a moonwalker in the deliberation of his movements, Kurt got to his feet, crossed the floor, and picked up a frozen tiramisu he'd been defrosting for tonight's dinner. Then he patted himself in front of the Canova, stuck his tongue out, raised the tiramisu, and rubbed it right into the statue's face. Cut 2. Bianca's studio. Bianca has just left, leaving the door unlocked and a little note. Cue sound effects as above, except for the silence. Instead, fade in a yammering fugue of West Midland voices raised in peak, and hold it as the statues realise something has changed. Typically thoughtful, Bianca has left a big closed shop-style mirror facing them. They see themselves. Let's repeat that line. For emphasis, they see themselves. Silence. And then one of them, yes, absolutely right, it's Mrs. Blanchflower, says, "Well." And then they all start talking at once. No need to report the exact words spoken. The gist of it is that they're all as pleased as anything to be out of those ridiculous, freezing cold, uncomfortable statues and back in their own bodies again. But that doesn't alter the fact that they've been mucked about something terrible. With hindsight, scrolling "sorry for any inconvenience" on the mirror in lipstick wasn't the most tactful thing Bianca ever did. And just wait. Someone hasn't heard the last of this. My lawyers, my husband, my Euro MP. At the back of the room, a scruffy heap, which at first sight was only a bundle of old rags, sits up, double takes, and huddles down again, furtively pulling a mangy leopard skin over his head and hoping to hell they haven't spotted him, but it's too late. With a simultaneous yowl of fury, 15 angry ex-statues turn on Nkazana, shaking fists and is demanding explanations. The witch doctor freezes, unable to move. In the course of his professional activities, he's daily called upon to face down swarms of gibbering, unquiet spirits, quell mobs of loutish ghosts by sheer force of personality, command fiends, and boss about the scum of 12 dimensions. Piece of cake. Faced with Mrs. Blanchflower and the other sadly Grange victims, he's a mongoose-faced snake. "Spirits," he hissed under his breath, "I command you by Nukunlukulu, the Great One, get me the hell out of here." The spirits attend, as they are bound to do when a master of the art orders them, although only the Isangona can see them. They're there, as present as a college of notaries, standing at the back of the room looking extremely embarrassed. "Sorry, Amakosi," they mouth noiselessly. "This time you're on your own." Cut 2. A police station on the very northernmost edge of China. Behind the desk, a sergeant slumbers dreamlessly under a circular fan. The door opens. Enter 3 very embarrassed-looking men. They wake the sergeant, who grunts and reaches for his notebook and a pen. What, he inquires, can he do for them? They nudge each other. Imploring looks are exchanged. Nobody wants to be the one who has to say it. A spokesman, however, is finally selected. He clears his throat. The expression on his face is so pitiful the desk sergeant starts groping instinctively for a clean handkerchief. "We'd like," the spokesman mumbles, "to report a theft." "Right, fine. What's been nicked?" "A wall. Sorry? A wall. Quite a big wall, actually." "Look, sorry about this. Did you actually just say somebody stolen a wall?" "That's right. Here, come and see for yourself." Bemused policeman rises, totters sleepily around the edge of the counter to the station door, and he looks out. Look, is this some sort of a joke? Because if it is, and then he sees the mountains. And that's really weird, because everybody knows you can't see the mountains from here, because the wall's in the way. Further up the valley, yes, you can see the mountains. Down here, though, the sergeant begins to scream. Cut 2. A brain-emptying vastness of sand, where the reflected heat hits you like a falling roof. Shimmering in the heat haze, the sun flickers like an Aldi's lamp. No wicked stepmother's smile was ever as cruel as the unvarying blue of the pitiless sky. Sun and sand. Yes, sun and sand we got, but you really don't want to come here for 2 weeks in August. Deserts are, by definition, big, and this is a big desert. Narrator's note. Little known fact here, as an army kid, we lived in Oman, Seb, just out of Muscat to be precise, and we were evacuated due to Gulf War One. I digress. One thing I discovered at this particular point, which I found very fascinating then and still do now, is that if you walk out into the desert and it's got that whole shimmery heat on the flat surface and you can't see the horizon, you fall over like one of them goats, like one of those fainting goats. You just drop. Because especially if you've got an inner ear thing, apparently. But yes, literally, this happened to me. I was like kind of quite happily poddling along, not paying any attention. You know, it was when the Discovery had first come out. You know, we'd been wadi bashing all the way down to Salalah, right? And halfway down is actually just like a flat plain. And we're taking a break so the car could cool down. And seriously, wadi bashing, it's terrifying, but I digress. But literally, I was just stretching my legs and walking out. And I lost sight of the horizon because the way the heat was shimmering. And apparently, I just keeled over. Yeah, so, yeah, fun fact. So, that was a big narrator's note. So let's get back to the fight. The dragon, waiting in the shade of the huge sack of cardboard boxes that contains the Great Wall of China for his scheduled rendezvous with Chubby and the boys, looks tiny. From a distance, you'd think he was a little wee lizard, the sort of thing desert travellers evict from their boots every morning before setting out. Narrator's note, it's another reason why you put your socks in the boot, especially if you're wadi bashing, so you make sure that nothing actually goes into them, so I just sort of let you know that, but most people that live in hot countries know that. But that's perspective playing tricks on you, because the dragon is, of course, huge, and more to the point, quite incredibly strong. Maybe you haven't yet realised how strong the dragon is. Well, consider this. Between 1 and 5 a.m. last night, this dragon single-handedly dismantled the Great Wall of China and lugged it here, boxful by boxful, across the Gobi Desert, without making a sound or disturbing anybody. No real trouble to the dragon. It was like picking up so much Lego off the living room carpet. It was still, nevertheless, one hell of a lot of Lego, and the effort combined with the heat is making him just a little bit sleepy. His soul, for want of a better word, is hovering in the middle air, looking down at the stack of boxes and thinking, pretty neat, huh? Then suddenly, he starts to panic. Instinctively, it makes to dart back into its body, but it can't. Imagine that nauseating feeling when you've just stepped outside to get the milk and the front door slammed shut behind you, locking you out. Normally the dragon's soul would have the door kicked in and be back inside in 20 seconds flat, but this time, what with purloining walls all night and not getting much sleep while it was at it, simply didn't have the strength, which is unfortunate because, cut to St. George, toiling wearily up a vast sand escarpment on his way to the scheduled rendezvous with Chubby, the boys, and a billion tons of hooky masonry. He feels strange. "Oh, look," he mutters to himself, "I'm flying. Or at least part of me is. The rest of me, head, arms, torso, legs, is down there on the deck. Flat on my face." Cue rushing wind, shimmering, tinkly sound, shorthand for magic, deep and rumbling, unworldly laughter. And Kazana, moving with remarkable agility for a man of his advanced years, shinned out the bathroom window, dropped 5 feet onto the fire escape, clattered down the steps like a 10-year-old, and sprinted across the alleyway to where Kurt had the van parked, engine running. "Quick," he panted. No need to explain further. There was a squeal and a smell of burning rubber. "Okay," Kurt asked, glancing down at the road map on his knee. "No," snapped the witch doctor. "It isn't. You might have warned me." "Warned you?" Kurt grinned. "Hey, man, I wouldn't insult you. I mean, you being a witch doctor and all, I'd have thought you'd have known. The hell with you, white boy. Let's see if it's so funny when I've turned you into a beetle." Feeling that the conversation was becoming a little bit unfocused, Bianca interrupted. "What Kurt meant to say was," she said, "is everything going to plan? With the, spirits, I mean." "Huh?" And Kazana frowned, then nodded. "Sure, no problem. The 15 dead people are out of the stolen statues and into the statues you made for them. The same with the souls of the dragon and St. George. I've conjured them out of their bodies, and the dragon will be too knackered after all that heavy lifting he's been doing." The old man paused, his eyes tight shut, and chuckled. "Hey, man," he muttered, "this is fun. I really Wish you could see this. Cut to 3 disembodied spirits hovering in the upper air. Now the first is the dragon, scrabbling frantically at the door of his magnificent, wonderful, all-powerful body, but he's just too weak. He can't open the damn thing. The second is St. George, also unexpectedly evicted from his body by the Zulu doctor's magic. Not his body, strictly speaking, remember, he's been dossing down in the statue Bianca made for Mike to live in, which he stole when the dragon carbonised him on his return from the future. Now George is just about to nip back in when he realises he's not the only disembodied spook out and about this fine Mongolian summer morning. A mere 100 miles or so to his west, he becomes aware of the soul of his oldest, greatest enemy, and more to the point, the empty dragon body. He hesitates. He thinks. Yes! Well, wouldn't you? Think it over. Yours for the hijacking. The most powerful, the strongest, most stylish, the fastest, most heavily armed and armoured, the slinkiest piece of flesh ever in the history of the universe, with the doors unlocked and the keys in the ignition. One swift, slick job of taking and driving away, and then we'll see exactly who's vaporising whom. With a none too gentle shove and a merry shout of "move over, asshole," George heaved the dragon's enervated soul out of the way, scrambled into the dragon's body and hit the gas. There was a roar and a stunning thump as the beast's enormous wings scooped up air like ice cream from the tub. Wild with fury and terror, the dragon's soul scrabbled desperately its own body, but there was no way in. A fraction of a second later and the body had gone. "Shit," whimpered the dragon. He collapsed onto the sand and started to quiver. The third spirit in waiting is Bianca's friend Mike. He has the advantage over the other two of knowing what's going on, and the moment George abandons his earthly overcoat and makes his dash for the dragon costume, Mike lets himself quietly out of St. George, marble statue by Bianca Wilson, and tiptoes across the middle there to where his own familiar shape is standing, vacant and unlocked, among the dunes. He drops in, he rams the legs into first gear, he scrams. And now the dragon's soul is alone, ebbing fast, still weak from his exertions and the devastating trauma of watching his own body zooming off over the horizon with his mortal enemy at the controls. He flickers on the edge of dissolution. Why bother, he asks himself. Bugger this for the proverbial duffing up to nothing. But not for long, because dragons don't quit. And, as the saying goes, a third-class ride beats the shit out of a first-class walk. There, abandoned on the escarpment of a dune, stands Bianca Wilson's statue of St. George, empty. Disgusted, but grimly determined, the soul of the last of the great serpents of the dawn of the world drags itself through the dry, gritty air and flops wretchedly into George. Narrator's note, just a minute. I digress. And notices something and suddenly feels a tiny bit better because it suggests somehow that more than meets the eye is going on. Because in the back window of St. George, somebody has stuck a little bit of shiny white cardboard with 5 words written on it in red lipstick. They were, "My other car's a Porsche." "Yes," mutters the dragon, suddenly and savagely cheerful. Isn't it ever? Like a salmon leaping the waterfall of the sun, the great dragon's sword, wings incandescent, fire streaming off his flawlessly armoured flanks, the scream of the slipstream drowning out all sounds except the exultant crowing of his own triumphant soul, which sang, "Shit! Wow! Fuck me! Is this a bit of all right then, or what?" Now bursting up through the clouds like a leaping dolphin, now swooping like a hunting eagle, now high, now low, as the intoxication of flight and power made his brain swim, his blood surge. Mine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. And then a light flashed soberingly bright in his eyes, and he glanced down. There, on the desert floor below him, 2 men stood beside a Land Rover on which was mounted a really big mirror. Dragons have eyes like hawks. That's a very silly thing to say because hawks are birds, whereas dragons' eyes are the finest optical instruments in the cosmos. The point being, although the two men were a long way away, George recognised them easily. Chubby Stevenson and the man Courtright. He'd seen them about the place, although he didn't know who he was. Intrigued, he swooped. "Hey!" Courtright yelled through a bullhorn. "Where the fuck you been? Get down here, like, now!" It then occurred to George that they didn't know it was him. They thought it was the dragon, George's enemy. Yet these people were supposed to be his friends, good guys. The hell with that? He filled his lungs and took aim. No, they'll keep. Let's find out what's going on before we fry anybody we might be able to use later. "Hey," George drawled. "Where's the fire?" "It's where it isn't that's pissed me off, man," Courtright replied. "Come on, get your telly gear. We got people waiting." "People?" George hovered, his front claws folded. What time of night do you call this expression on his face? "What people?" Stevenson, he noticed, was looking a little bit sheepish as he leaned over and whispered something in Courtright's ear. The agent stepped back and stared at him. "You arrange the biggest fight of all time," he said, "and you never get round to telling the contestants." George quivered. The word fight had hijacked his imagination and was demanding to be flown to Kingdom Come. "What fight?" he asked. "You and St. George," Chubby replied. "The rematch. I was, planning it as a surprise." "You succeeded?" Chubby scowled. "Don't know why you're sounding all snotty about it," he replied self-righteously. "That's what you want, isn't it? A chance to sort that little shit out once and for all. I mean, that's why you came back in the first place, right?" "Sure thing." George nodded vigorously. "Teach the little toe rag a lesson. You won't live long enough to forget." "Well then." A smile swept across the dragon's face, in the same way that barbarian hordes once swept across Europe. "I call that very thoughtful of you," he said. "Going to all that trouble just to please me. But what makes you think the little chicken shit'll have the balls to show up? If I was him, the moment I heard about the fight, I'd be off." "He doesn't know about the fight, stupid." "You mean," said George, grinning cheerfully, "you set him up?" Yeah, look, from the outset." "Sure." Chubby looked at him strangely. What's got into you all of a sudden?" he demanded. "Not what. Who. But that's beside the point. We'll sort it out later. So where should I go?" Courtright pointed due north. "You'll know what it is as soon as you see it," he said. "Hang around just outside till we show up with Sir George. Then it'll be over to you, all right? And don't say I don't find you quality gigs, you ungrateful arsehole." George nodded gravely. "I think I'll be able to handle it from then on," he said. "Be seeing you." Not long afterwards, Chubby's helicopter landed beside the huge artificial mountain of packing cases that had appeared overnight in the middle of the desert, and two men climbed out, crouching to avoid the spinning rotor blades. "George!" they were yelling. "George, where is the goddamn—" They found him asleep in a sort of masonry igloo he'd made for himself at the foot of the mountain. This made their job much easier. Chubby slipped the handcuffs into place while Courtright woke him up. "Hi, George," Chubby said. "Look, no need for alarm, but we need you to do something for us, and we really haven't got the time to convince you it's a good idea before we set off for the venue. This way we can convince you as we go, and you won't waste time by running away and hiding." "Suits me." The two men looked at each other. "Good of you to be so reasonable," Chubby said. "This way, then." In the chopper, Chubby explained that when he'd rescued George from the police in Birmingham, he'd had an ulterior motive. "You rescued..." "Yes, sorry, me and my teabag memory. Do forgive me.
Carry on.
Yeah, yep. Chubby had a vague feeling that something was going really wrong, but that was so close to his normal mental state that he just ignored it. You see, it's his damn dragon.
Oh, yes.
Sure, Chubby sighed, his face a picture of frustration and annoyance. The bloody thing is starting to be a real pest, you know. Something's got to be done about it before it ruins my business and destroys a major city or something.
I quite understand,
said the dragon, nodding.
This planet ain't big enough for the three of us, that sort of thing.
3? Oh, I see what you mean. Well, of course I don't have to tell you. You ought to see the fucker gets what's coming to him as badly as I do. Well, now's your chance.
Really? And truly?
Really, said Chubby, smiling. And truly, that's why Mr. Courtright here. Courtright smiled.
Hi, George. I'm Mr. Courtright. Haven't we met somewhere? Quite possibly, George. Quite possibly.
Mr. Courtright, Chubby went on, and I have arranged this fight to the death. You and Mr. Bad Guy. We built you an arena and everything, and you're gonna love it.
Quite,
said the dragon.
Only, and I hate seem downbeat here, don't you think the fight's going to be ever so slightly one-sided? I mean, him with the wings and the tail and the fiery breath. Me with a sword. Not that I'm chicken or anything, but...
Courtright chuckled.
Tell him, Chubby.
We've sorted all that, Chubby said. We've got you some backup. The best, in fact. The name Kurt Lundqvist mean anything to you?
No.
Chubby shrugged. After your time, I guess. Well, just as the dragon comes hell for leather at you, out of, so to speak, a cloudless sky, Kurt Mad Dog Lundqvist will be poison ready in a concealed bunker under the press box with a very nasty surprise for Mr. Dragon. He won't know what hit him, and either, more to the point with the punters, they'll think it was you. Neat trick, huh?
Chubby,
the dragon looked shocked.
Surely that's cheating.
Yeah, you got a problem with that? The dragon's eyes gleamed, and if Chubby felt noticed, consciously at least, that they were yellow with a black slit for a pupil, that was his fault.
Ignore me,
the dragon said.
I think it's a wonderful plan. Thank you ever so much for arranging it all. You must let me find some way to pay you back.
George, Chubby said. My old pal, forget it. I mean, what are friends for? The dragon shook his head.
Chubby,
he said.
And Lynn, this is one favour I won't be forgetting in a hurry. Believe me. Okay, let's go. I can hardly wait.
Oh, so... essentially, both parties have switched bodies. Now both parties know exactly what's going on with each side. So they're being double-crossed by Lynn Courtright and Chubby. So what is it that's going on next? What will happen with Bianca? What will happen with Mike? What will happen with Mr. Kurt Lundqvist? What on earth is going on? It'll all come to fruition in our next episode, which is chapter 19 of 20 of Paint Your Dragon by the Mr. Tom Holt. So my lovely, lovely beans, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. It's really brightened my day to read it for you, as is talking to you guys and hearing from you and all of that sort of thing. And no matter what, I appreciate all of you very, very much. And we have got 2 more chapters left of Paint Your Dragon. And then we will do Here Comes the Sun to finish off the year. It's going to be awesome, and we've got all of this to enjoy. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you very, very, very much, and I hope you look after yourselves. You hydrate if you're too hot, you snuggle up and keep warm if you're too cold, and you sleep a lot and sleep well. Catch you later, petal.